Welcome to the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
Welcome to another episode of the McFeely Mess podcast at Inforum.com on a mid-February day after the Super Bowl and before the NFL draft. And as things are sort of somewhat in a quiet period in the NFL, although I think for my guest today, I don't know if things ever really slow down if you are an NFL beat writer for a team, as it seems to be with, frankly, many sports. I don't know that things slow down ever for the local FCS college football team, North Dakota State. It seems like it's become a 12-month-a-year job just to kind of keep up with what's going on with them. But that doesn't compare to covering the San Francisco 49ers for the San Francisco Chronicle, as Eric Branch has done now for many years. And he joins us today on the podcast to talk about one of our favorite guys locally, Trey Lance, the quarterback who the 49ers picked in the draft a couple of years ago with the number 3 overall pick out of North Dakota State. We followed Trey's every move, good and bad, I guess, in some cases. And I want to catch up with Eric to find out where things stand with the Niners and Trey Lance. There was talk that he might be traded. There was talk that the Niners might go with a different quarterback and all kinds of stuff going on. So it's time to catch up with Eric Branch. Hello, sir. How are we doing?
I'm doing well, Mike. And this is the first time we've done a podcast since we actually met in person this summer at the Vikings training camp. So I feel like we're officially kind of BFFs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I actually feel the same way. I was telling my wife about our meeting down in the Twin Cities at Vikings training camp when they had the Niners in for what do they call them? A joint practice or a co-practice or something. And I said, God, this guy from San Francisco, he's all right. We got along okay. So it's two worlds colliding. It's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, nice to be back with you.
So, I don't know if we talked about this when we were down in the Twin Cities, but I referenced it in our intro. I don't know how you guys do it. I don't. I've worked for newspapers now for, going on near, I suppose, 40 years because I'm old. And we're busy enough, and especially in the modern world where, things have been cut and newsrooms are smaller, even at our level. It just seems like the news in today's modern world never stops, and we're always connected on Twitter and email and everything else, texting. But I can't imagine being an NFL beat writer or a Major League Baseball beat writer or an NBA beat writer or anything, because it never stops, Eric. How do you do this? I mean, I know you need to put food on the table for your family, but I mean, my God, it does it ever stop?
Well, I would say you mentioned other beat writers in other sports. And so I would say, relatively speaking, relatively speaking, we have it easy. I could not be an NBA beat writer. I could not be a Major League Baseball beat writer, just due to the travel. I mean, with the family and everything, that would just be untenable. And so from the perspective of travel, and your schedule, largely, and I say that because, the NFL teams will have their media availabilities oftentimes, at least the 49ers do in the morning. And so it's not always possible, but it's not unusual for me during the season to be able to still have dinner with my family. And maybe I still have some work to do after dinner, but you can have, I have found, you can work hard, but the schedule for an NFL beat writer allows you to stay married, remember your children's names,
not end up in a different bar every night on the road somewhere, which is also part of the lore of Major League Baseball writers over the years. Is that there's I know a couple of them or a few of them, and that that was a problem or has been a problem for a long time, sadly for a lot of baseball beat writers.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is, you're right. I mean, the NFL, like a lot of professional sports, does a wonderful job of keeping itself in the news. So you go from the season to the combine to free agency to the draft to OTAs to a break. Generally there's about a month to 5 to 6 week break in between mid-June to training camp, where the NFL finally sleeps, and unless you have a player get arrested or whatever, because that's but even if that's the case, there's an understanding, during that 5 to 6 weeks, I am off, so even if the San Francisco 49ers were to fall into the ocean, I'm not going to cover it. Anyway, it's a lot, but and sometimes, well, not to get too far afield with this, but I'm 50 years old, and I will be writing about a strained groin and be like, am I too old for this? What am I doing? This is not making a difference in the world. But, it's such a small percentage. I've given a lot of freedom to find other find stories that are unique and fun and features and enterprise. So I used to think, man, at some point I cannot be an NFL beat writer because I'm just going to be such a loser. But I'm now content with being a loser.
Wow.
And if I'm doing this at 65, still writing about, lacerated kidneys, I think I'm still going to be happy.
well, it's not going to get any better than that. So I'm just going to stop right there and move on to Trey Lance, because that's the line of the podcast. Comes at the 10-minute mark or the 6-minute mark. Wow. So our guy Trey Lance. All right. He was going to be the guy this year. Was the starting quarterback at training camp, started the year as a starting quarterback, got hurt, was replaced by Jimmy Garoppolo, who played well and led the Niners to several victories. Then Garoppolo gets hurt. Then Brock Purdy comes in, who was the last guy drafted as Mr. Irrelevant, I think is what he's called. And actually Brock Purdy came in out of Iowa State and played very well and led the Niners to the NFC Championship game, where they've been before in recent years. And so there was all kinds of talk of, well, what is Trey Lance's status now? Has he lost his starting job? Will they trade him? Do they want him? Do they keep him as a backup because he's cheap? He has not on a second contract yet. All these different things swirling. Where do the Niners stand, Eric, with their quarterback situation? Garoppolo, I think, you go ahead. I mean, where do the 49ers stand with their quarterback situation?
Well, this is what 3 days after their season ended with the NFC Championship game, Kyle Shanahan, and you got to be careful what you believe when NFL people start talking, but he outlined their quarterback plan, and that was that Brock Purdy and Trey Lance are their top two quarterbacks, and they would not make some big splash move for a third or fourth quarterback, because those are the Brock Purdy and Trey are the only two quarterbacks they have under contract. So they're going to need to add to that position. But his point was it is not going to be some major move for a third quarterback. So that came with some, nothing's in cement and all that. But that would seem to be the plan as of right now.
So the wrinkle here, Garoppolo is going to be gone, right? Jimmy Garoppolo he's going to be gone with what Kyle Shanahan said. So he's out of the picture. That's no longer going to be a discussion point. But Brock Purdy, who played well in what the Niners asked of him and played well, he was hurt in the NFC Championship game famously, and they ended up having to bring him back in the game because they had a left tackle playing quarterback or whatever in the title game, whatever. But Purdy is going to have major elbow surgery and is expected to be out, I think, a minimum of 6 months. And if you do the math, then it brings you to, early in training camp and if he's going to be ready. So how does that situation stand, Eric, with Purdy's injury? Does that mean that Trey Lance will start the year as a starting quarterback, or is that still undecided, or what's the status there?
Well, that means, again, we're trusting the 49ers that this is the plan. That means that Trey Lance will be, their top healthy quarterback available when OTAs start in May and at the start of training camp. And so he had, Brock Purdy is not going to have his surgery until next week, February 22nd. So, he would be back, if it would be like literal about it, say August 22nd. So that's pretty deep into training camp. So Trey Lance, will have roughly, close to at least 3 weeks of, being the top quarterback in training camp after being the guy in the off-season program. So, and that includes preseason games, probably at least 2 preseason games, if not all 3 preseason games. So, it's a great opportunity for him. I mean, teammates such as George Kittle, just based on what each quarterback has shown, Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, have said, well, it's Brock Purdy's job. And Trey, during Super Bowl week on Radio Row, acknowledged the situation, and he said he just wants a chance to compete. He understands how well Brock Purdy played. So if he makes, improvement and progress, this kind of chasm that exists right now between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance as far as any sort of competition, he could certainly close it and say, if he offers more evidence that, okay, this is the guy, this is the guy we thought we were drafting. And, I'm sure we'll get into it, but, that hasn't been fully evident yet. And granted, what's been a small sample size in his career.
So before we get into that, and that was my next question, but let me bridge that by asking, is Trey Lance healthy? Because he had the broken leg and then had to have another procedure after the first surgery. And so will he be healthy for OTAs, and will he be healthy for the start of training camp? Is that expected?
That's expected that he'll be healthy for OTAs. Yeah. So that's May. And that comes with the whole, we never know, but that's
right.
Generally the timeline. So that doesn't sound like it'll be an issue.
Okay. So then that leads us to what you hinted at, which is the Niners did a bunch of things and gave away a bunch of things to get Trey Lance with the 3rd pick in the draft. Now, God, what is it? 23 years ago, I guess it is. That's, boy, time flies when you have a global pandemic. It's amazing how quickly time flies. He was the 3rd pick. He was the guy. They were going to hand the keys of the franchise over to him. They tried to this year, as you said, with, I guess, mixed results or questionable results. So where does Trey Lance stand in the big picture? I mean, are the Niners like regretting what they did? Are they ready to move on from him? Is it what is his standing in the organization right now? If other players and even Trey Lance himself is saying, well, it's Brock Purdy's job and I just want to a chance to compete, that's a whole different thing than saying this guy's the franchise quarterback.
Yeah. So again, in fairness to Lance, he's had 4 starts in the NFL. And so you can't really judge much and make any sort of definitive declaration. But from what we've seen, obviously in practices in those 4 starts, I think it's raised some questions if he's the guy, whether that's fair or not. But he's completed just under 55% of his passes. His quarterback rating is, I think, just below 85. And again, we're talking about 102 pass attempts, but it didn't reflect very well on him when Brock Purdy came in. Again, as you mentioned, Mr. Irrelevant, 262nd pick in the draft, and ran the offense beautifully. Was the distributor. But it wasn't just like he was a robot in Shanahan's system. He showed great instincts, a knack for feeling the rush. There was really something to him. That doesn't mean he's the next Tom Brady, but, it looks like he's at the very least a competent and capable NFL starter. And in the 3 starts that Trey has finished, the Niners have scored 10 points in 2 of those starts. And so with Brock Purdy, the offense was humming pretty well with Jimmy Garoppolo. And with Brock Purdy, it kind of ascended to another level. And when Trey has been in, and granted, again, I keep saying that he hasn't been in much, but the offense hasn't looked right at all. I think one thing is, Trey, is a dual threat quarterback, but what has been something that I noticed is he's not really fast enough, at least in the NFL, to get to the outside really on a consistent basis. I mean, defensive ends can chase him down. And so you saw a lot of designed quarterback power runs that Kyle Shanahan was using with Trey. And to the point where, I mean, I was not the only one who wrote this, but it was written like, this is not sustainable. You can't run your quarterback between the tackles this much and keep him healthy. And that's obviously another issue with Trey is, despite the fact that he hasn't played much, he's had a broken finger and a sprained knee and a broken ankle. And so durability has already come into question. And I know that is kind of this gray area. It doesn't mean he's injury prone or has he just been a victim of bad luck. It's really tough to say. Mm-hmm. But I think there's been a level of disappointment maybe with, I don't know if it's his athleticism, but just how dynamic he might be as a runner. And the fact that he is, run so much. He ran 16 times. He had 16 carries in his first start. And then in his second start, his first start of this past season, the season opener of 2022, he had 13 carries. That's a lot. Oof. I mean, that's a lot yes. for an NFL quarterback.
Well, and the funny thing is North Dakota State didn't run him. I mean, 15 carries in an FCS game is much different than 15 carries in an NFL game. But even NDSU picked and chose their spots to run him. I mean, they, when it got to be a game they needed or a national championship game, the Bison said, okay, the training wheels are off. We're just going to run you 20 times. But if they didn't need to, they didn't run him. But the Niners were running him almost as much as a running back, which is, as you've said, it's not sustainable at that level.
No, his 16 carries in his first career start were the most by a quarterback in a regular season game in franchise history. His 13 carries in his third career start were the third most in franchise history. Niners had Steve Young. I mean, he ran a lot. Didn't run like this, and he didn't run between the tackles like this. And I think it's not what you saw with Purdy and obviously Garoppolo, who's been their starter for the most part since the latter part of 2017. They run the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan's offense. And when Trey got in, it's tough exactly to say, is it because Trey has not developed enough as a passer, or is it because they really want to take advantage of his mobility, that it was a drastically different looking offense?
Sure.
I would lean towards the fact that Kyle Shanahan just hasn't had the trust in Trey to run the offense, from the pocket consistently as he would like.
Well, and that's the next question then is, okay, so, he's not as fast to the outside as they thought he might be, but from what you've been able to discern, does Trey Lance have the, as we like to say, the arm talent or the strength to be an NFL quarterback, dropping back in the pocket? And then secondly, is he picking up the offense and doing what he needs to do as the quarterback? I mean, there's a lot of things going on with an NFL quarterback. I don't think people appreciate the level that you have to be athletically, intelligently, all of these other things, instinctively, all the things you have to be an NFL quarterback. And so the running part is one part of it. How about the arm part of it, the passing part of it, and then how about the picking up the offense, reading defense is part of it. All of this are different aspects, if you will.
Right. His arm strength is fine. I mean, that's not an issue. And I don't want to get as far as how well he sees the field and his progressions and can he get from his first read to his second to his third read quickly. I don't know, how much of an issue, that has been. I don't think I don't think I'm going on a limb and offering great analysis to say Brock Purdy certainly was making, quicker decisions and seeing the field that much faster. Does that mean Trey is, I guess below average in that category? I don't know. I do think part of the thing is, and this has obviously been brought up, Brock Purdy was a 4-year starter in the Big 12, and he played a lot of football. Mm-hmm. And he was, but why? So why? Okay, so why was he the last pick of the draft? Well, he's not big enough, and the arm strength, but there was never an issue about I guess his release or his progressions. I mean, it was just like, well, he can't overcome the lack of arm strength and the size. But his experience, you just see, the things he does, and, he's played a lot of football. And obviously that contrasts with Trey Lance, who did not play, at that level and did not play a lot, 318 passes
right.
in college. And so he needs reps. He partly due to things out of his control, he still hasn't gotten a whole lot of reps, in the NFL. As mentioned, he's thrown 102 regular season passes, basically, watched as a rookie and basically had to watch again in his second year. So entering his third season, he still hasn't gotten, the reps he needs given his lack of, kind of his college pedigree and lack of, one full season. And so we're still here, entering his third season saying, who is he?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, there's evidence that, okay, maybe he'll be a disappointment, but I don't think we've seen nearly enough to make any sort of definitive statement.
I know you've referenced Trey talking to the media and acknowledging the situation and that. Is there any indication that he is frustrated or that he is disappointed or that he is unhappy or any of those things?
He's acknowledged. So just for clarity, we didn't talk to Trey all season, after he was injured until locker cleanout day, 2 days after that NFC Championship game. So we haven't been having this constant dialogue with, hey, Trey, how you doing? How you feeling?
Right.
And he did the most talking we've heard him publicly, on Radio Row pitching Sleep Number mattresses. So
yeah, you got to do what you got to do. You got to
absolutely.
You got to make the bank when you can.
No question. So through our conversation we had in the locker room right after the season, and just what he said, during Super Bowl week, he's acknowledged, of course, not breaking news, that it was a very frustrating year for him. He certainly said all the right things, and I believe him to be sincere. And, he's happy for Brock Purdy. And, I think, he's self-aware to understand the situation. And so he's acknowledged it and has just said, I hope I want the chance to compete. And I think, if not for Brock Purdy's surgery, I think it would have taken, Brock Purdy, really falling off a cliff for Trey to have a chance at being the starter entering the 2023 season. But, as we've discussed, the situation is different. And so he'll at least have an opportunity to close the gap. And, when Brock Purdy comes back, that's going to be about 3 weeks before the regular season. And, I would think there's still going to be some sort of, ramp up time for him. Even if he is, fully recovered, he won't have played since January 29th, any sort of football. So there's still a time. I don't think he's just going to jump right into, having all these first team reps, they'll ease them in gradually. So you're talking about maybe getting into September and Trey's still taking, a lot of the reps. So again, there's a runway here for him to make his move.
I just had somebody yesterday raise something with me that I, honest to God, knew nothing about before yesterday. And it is, was there a video of Lance making it rain with a stripper or something? Was that a thing in San Francisco? Did that make the rounds or something, or was that?
Now that you mention it, yes, that was but I'm having a hard time placing the timing of it.
I don't, like I said, honest to goodness, somebody told me about it yesterday and they're like, oh my God, it was a huge scandal. I'm going, I heard nothing about it, so it couldn't have been that huge. Not that I'm the oracle of all information, but
Yes, I do recall this now, and I think it was never clear. It may have come out at some point early in the season, but it was never clear when the video was shot.
Oh, okay.
There was some question, how deep in the off season this had been. Was this his rookie season, or whatever? So
it was not like some huge, people weren't calling for his head in San Francisco. This was not like a huge thing, or what, maybe it was. I don't know.
No, it was not a huge thing. That's a thing that will get the internet churning for sure.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And, get your clicks and Trey Lance seen in a strip club. And but it didn't quite square with Trey's reputation. I will say that. Yeah. On the other hand, it's not exactly breaking news when a professional athlete is in a strip club. So
correct.
But it was like, well, I thought, I do think people were like, well, I thought Trey Lance was not the strip club guy. So,
right. Okay. All right. Like I said, I had to ask you because I knew nothing about it before yesterday, which was February 15th, and it happened apparently a long time ago. So it's an interesting offseason. Interesting time for NDSU's quarterbacks in the NFL because not only is Trey Lance involved in what he's going through with the Niners, but Carson Wentz apparently is going to be let go by the Commanders, which would be like the third team in 3 years to send him down the road. And then Easton Stick, the backup for the Chargers all the years. That's okay. The backup for the Chargers all these years apparently is ready to move on too because his rookie contract is up. So there's a lot of stuff going on with NDSU's quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, I've been surprised by Carson Wentz, I guess partially because every time he's played the Niners through the years, whether it was with the Eagles or the Colts, he's won. He's looked really good. I've obviously seen him in other situations, and I understand. But I've been surprised. It's been well documented. I'm sure everyone there knows it, the story of his NFL career. But his size and the things he did early in his career with the Eagles, it seemed like he was on the top 5 quarterback trajectory. Yeah. If not for his knee injury, I think he was going to be the MVP that season. So, it's just it's something I've thought about, not necessarily specific to Carson Wentz, but as everyone here, I said, well, we got Brock Purdy and we're set for the next 10 years. It's like, well, let's just, there's no reason. He didn't give us much evidence to believe he can't do it, but you just never know. And maybe he should have a full season as a starter before we proclaim, that he is this perennial Pro Bowler.
Yes.
But I will say, Brock Purdy, I was one of the last to join the Brock Purdy bandwagon. and at some point I said, okay, fine, this guy is passing, pretty much every test. So I've been wrong about Brock Purdy already.
All right, sir, I'll let you go. Thank you very much. We appreciate it as always. And we will catch up again, especially since we're BFFs now. We will catch up again at some point in the relatively near future. Okay.
That would be great. Yes, and I think we departed last time with a hug. That may have been prompted by me. I don't know how into it you were, but I think that may have sealed it. I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I told my wife that as well, and because I'm not a hugger, I am not a hugger guy. And my wife went, "Oh my God, how did you respond to that?" And I went, "Oh, it's fine. It was just we're friends, so it's all good. It was all good. It's all good." So, all right, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
All right, be good. Take care.
Yep, you bet. Eric Branch covers the San Francisco 49ers for the San Francisco Chronicle. You can read all his good work there following Trey Lance and the Niners. The injury, by the way, to Lance cost me a trip to San Francisco, but that's a whole different story. We'll talk about that on some other podcast. This has been the McFeely Mess Podcast, Inforum.com. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to Inforum.com and search Mike McFeely.